Hey guys, Pockets here. So this is going to be the Twin Ogron Feral DPS guide like promised. So this footage is from a poll I had this week, where I managed to get rank 1 by about 2,000 DPS. I was really happy with that. I wouldn't say I played exceptionally well. It was a good poll for sure, but there's probably still room for improvement. Since then, my friend Branchout got rank 2 by, he beat the other guy by 1,000 DPS, so the gap isn't quite as big. But if you want to see the parse, that's going to be down below in the comments. I'll link to the Warcraft Logs parse. So I'm going to pause here for a second to explain. So as far as talents go, you can see it if you're familiar with my WeakAura display. This means I've got Lunar Inspiration talented. I did cast Healing Touch, but that's just because of a bad habit. I'm so used to casting Healing Touch when I use Blood Talons. But I'm using Incarnation and Lunar Inspiration on this fight. Lunar Inspiration is going to be what you want to use if you want to do the most damage. You can do Blood Talons. It's not like it's going to be massively inferior. I mean, that's the whole point of the talents, really. But you aren't going to do as much damage if you're actually playing Lunar Inspiration correctly. And I'll go over that pretty straightforward throughout the video. As far as a movement talent, you can see I'm using Displacer Beast here. I don't think there's any reason to use any of the other talents in this fight. Displacer Beast is so good it lets you blink over the fire, which not only increases your survivability a lot, but increases your DPS uptime, because you can let yourself get cornered just moving around whatever side of the boss you need to, and then just blink over the fire, and don't even have to walk out of melee range at all, which is certainly not true if you're using the other talents. And while you might think it's pretty good or something, if you charge over the fire, you're going to get a stack of the fire debuff, and that's no bueno. So, alright, so a couple more things to talk about here before we get started. So, in the upper right hand corner, you can see I've got my food buff, of course. That food buff is actually a mastery buff. So what this means is if your mastery isn't your highest stat in your gear, what you're going to want to do to force a mastery buff for this fight, because that's what you want for a two-target fight like this, is you want to have a set of gear that just happens to work out so that you have mastery as your highest stat, and then put that on before you eat, and then take it off and put on your normal gear. That's the ideal case. Also, if you really wanted to try hard this shit, you could have like alternate rings, like buy a second legendary ring and put mastery on it, and then swap to that mastery ring, or have a second of the same ring in the other slot and have mastery on that ring too, because that would be ideal. Same thing with amulets and cloaks, of course, and even weapons if you wanted to do that. The other thing is, when the video starts, you're going to see the bottom right to my main WeakAura display, you're going to see bleed trackers for the second boss, whichever boss I'm not targeting at the time. And it's really important that you have something like this on your UI where you can see the bleeds on both targets at all times, because if you don't have that sort of thing, you're not going to be able to keep your uptime as high as you'd like, because pretty much this entire fight is going to be looking at bleed timers and be like, okay, what do I need to refresh next? What do I need to refresh next? So you need a display like that to be able to do that. So if you're interested in that WeakAura, I'll have the import string below my comments. And also, if you're interested in the main display, the main WeakAura display that you see in the middle before the vid started, then that'll be in the description as well. The first thing you're going to see here is you're going to see my opener. So I prowl, I walk up to the boss, I do my pre-pot, of course, and the first thing I do is I put a rake up on pull. And then from there, I'm going to go and try to get Moonfire on both bosses as fast as possible. The reason that is because I don't have Incarnation up. You could do this a little differently. You could pre-Incarnation, but I don't think that's the way to go here. So I don't have Incarnation up yet. So if I was to apply a second rake here on Phemos, it wouldn't have the stealth damage bonus, and then I'm just going to have to refresh it later, so that's pointless. And I'm going to get my Moonfires in here before I use Incarnation, which is going to allow me to save 2 GCDs during the Incarnation that wouldn't be buffed by Incarnation at all, so there's no reason to cast those Moonfires during it. So I got my 2 Moonfires up, so I hit my cooldowns, my Incarnation, my Tiger's Fury, my Berserk, my Coin, and then I'm going to go for the second rake on Phemos. I'm at 5 combo points, so I put my Rip on Phemos, I go back to pull. Here I thrash to burn some energy, because we lost it on pull, so you're gonna want to thrash. You can generally thrash anytime you're in Berserk, because you're going to have the energy to do it without your bleed up times getting slaughtered. So I got that thrash up. Next here, you can see I refreshed my rake, because that rake was my opener rake and it only had improved rake on it. It didn't have Tiger's Fury. So by refreshing it there, I got the 15% more damage for that whole 19 seconds. And now I'm going to be at 5 combo points again, and I'm going to go for my second rip on the target that didn't have it yet. At this point, I'm going to go to both targets, refresh Moonfire on both, because it's going to be falling off. I get to 5 combo points, and I do a bite because I look at my Savage Roar timer. That's fine, of course, because I'm in Incarnation. I look at my rip timers, and there's no way I can refresh these yet, so I go ahead and do a bite. You're not going to see a lot of that in this fight. It's mostly just going to be during cooldowns because of what you just saw, basically. So here, my rake is getting down pretty low. You're gonna want to start refreshing this sometime soon. The key here, if you wanted to get the most possible damage out of it, is because it is snapshotted with Tiger's Fury. You want to keep shredding until this gets below 3 seconds, and then you refresh it so you get that extra 1 tick of Tiger's Fury damage. You don't want to let it fall off because obviously you still got Incarnation up. So if you let it fall off, you're not gonna. I mean, you're gonna get 15% of a tick damage, but because your GC capped, it could be down for up to a second. It's not really worth it. So I'm gonna refresh that rake once it gets below 3 seconds. Just shred as long as you need to. I'm at 5 combo points again, and I look at my rip timers. I look at my Savage Roar timer, and I say, oh, okay. Well, this rip's at 10 seconds. I'm going to need to refresh this soon. Now, if you were doing a single target fight, you'd look at a 10-second rip and you'd be like, oh, well, it's 10 seconds. I've got my cooldowns up. I can get to 5 combo points in 10 seconds, no problem. So I'm just going to go ahead and bite. This fight is a little different since you're not going to be doing a whole lot of biting really at all in the entire fight. You want to be pretty... You don't want to be too quick to jump to biting. Since I'm 3 seconds away from being able to rip here, what I choose to do instead is to keep my rip up times going from shit, because what you'll see is if your rip is at like 10 seconds like it is in this situation and you go ahead and bite, you're going to see your rip up times are going to go to shit pretty fast, and that is certainly not what you want. This fight is all about maximizing your dot up times on everything all the time. So what I do is I see I'm at 10 seconds, I'm at 5 combo points, so instead of going for the bite, since I'm at full energy, I cast a Thrash to stall. I burn 50 energy, and that allows my rip to tick down a little bit more, so I'm not wasting quite as much duration. So my energy is getting a little higher, and I tab back to Femos because his rip is about to come to the 7.2 mark. I refresh it at about 7.5 seconds, which is 0.3 seconds early, but not a big deal at all. That's the way to go here. And now at this point, I'm going to be looking at my rakes, rake, moonfire, and see, okay, what do I need to refresh next? So look at this rake, it's at 4.5 seconds almost, so I'll be able to refresh this next, and then I probably want to go refresh the 2 moonfires, and then after that I'm going to need to refresh the rake. So I go, I wait, I shred, and then that rake got below 3 seconds, so I refresh it, and now I'm going to go and refresh moonfire on this target. I hit 5 combo points, so I wait for this to get to 7.2 seconds, I refresh the rip, and then I go to the other target, refresh moonfire, because it's about to fall off, and then the last thing you're going to want to do here, and you're going to try to coordinate this every time, and sometimes it doesn't work out quite as well as it does in this video, but you're going to want to cast Rake on both targets as close to the end of Incarnation as you possibly can to get the most possible double Rake damage out of your Incarnation buff. So after I refresh those 2 Moonfires, my only priority here before Incarnation ends is to get Rake on both targets. So regardless of duration, I go to Femos, I refresh Rake, and then I turn around and tab back, and I get a Rake refresh on Pole with 0.5 seconds left on the buff, which is awesome. Now at this point, Femos is getting dragged out for Whirlwind, and what you're going to want to consider here is you need your Rake and Rip uptime duration remaining when it gets pulled out to be pretty high, because you don't want those things to fall off immediately when he gets pulled out, because you're not going to be able to just run into the Whirlwind and refresh it willy-nilly. Well, you could, but it'd be a little silly to do that. Your Moonfire is a little different, of course, because you can refresh it anytime you want with just like a nice jump spin. So what you're going to see here is he's casting the Whirlwind, and there I actually could have gone and refreshed Rake on him, and obviously I would have took some Whirlwind damage, but it doesn't hit that hard. It's not the end of the world, and you can blink out of it. So that would have been an option there. I just chose not to do it for whatever reason, even though it probably would have been the way to go. So I'm back on Pole. What you're going to see is I'm at 5 combo points and my Rip can't be refreshed. This is something that's going to happen pretty often when you're on Pole, because Femos gets pulled out and then you can't always spend your 5 combo points on Rip. So something you want to consider is, of course, you look at your Savage Roar. Maybe this is a little low, I could refresh Savage Roar instead, but in this case my Rip is close enough that I can just pool for a bit and I'm going to be able to refresh it at 7.2 seconds. My Rake fell off there because it expired a little early, which is unfortunate. But so one thing I can mention here is there's a couple fight mechanics that you're going to see throughout the fight, and one of them, of course, is the arcane volatility. And when that gets on you, you have basically 2 options. you can either run it out and then blink back in, which is certainly an option. It's something I do very often. The other alternative, which is a bit more risky, would be to wait until it's at the very last second, and then you quick turn your camera and blink out, and then run back in, which you can do. You could also skull bash back in, which would be a little faster since you don't need the interrupt, and you can use the charge to get in a little quicker. But that is, of course, a little more risky because if you fail to blink out in time because you're GCD locked or whatever, then you could kill people or put people in pretty serious danger. So at this point, what you're gonna actually, I can go back here and comment. So this quake happens, this pulverize happens, and what you're gonna see me do is you're gonna see me run into the wall here, so that when I get knocked back, it doesn't kick me out of melee range of the boss. That pulverize does not really do that much damage. You can see I even have the enfeebling roar there, and it didn't do that much damage. I popped my shield wall just for good measure. If you're gonna stand in it, you probably want to pop your shield wall, because otherwise, I mean, you're just like super scumbag. You're not gonna need your shield wall unless you're bad and stand in the fire a lot. And it actually barely even broke my absorb that I had on me. I had a power word shield or something that had like 80k absorb. So here I chase Phemos out. I get my rake and my rip refreshed before he whirlwinds. That's great. And then I go back to pull. I'm going to be able to refresh the Moonfire from a distance, so I do a jump spin here, refresh Moonfire, and then here I'm going to try to get my Rake and my Rip up before Savage Roar falls, and I got it. So then I refresh my Savage Roar, and here I'm just chilling until the boss comes back in. So the Whirlwind ends, he comes back in, I run out to him, and I refresh my bleeds. That's something you're going to want to do frequently, because usually when the Whirlwind ends, your bleeds are going to be ending, and you want to run out to him to get those bleeds up as fast as possible to keep your uptime as high as you can. You will lose it on a couple auto attacks, but that's really not a big deal compared to getting your bleeds up faster. So, especially if you have 5 combo points when the Whirlwind ends, you can run out to him, put the Rip back up immediately, put your Rake up, put your Moonfire up, which hopefully should be up since you probably refreshed it during the Whirlwind. But there's that. So at this point, it's basically just a matter of using Tiger Sphere on cooldown like you always should be, and going back and forth between the two targets, looking at my Rake timers, looking at my Moonfire timers, saying, okay, which one do I need to refresh next? Whenever I get to 5 combo points, I go, okay, which target has the lower Rip? I need to cast a Rip on that target. Can I do it immediately, or do I have to wait? If you have to wait, then you have to wait. If you have to wait too long, you might go, okay, can I refresh Savage Roar instead? Because my Rip isn't close to 7.2 seconds yet. So that's pretty much the fight for the most part. I'm going to talk about cooldown usage a little bit for the rest of the fight mostly. So you can see I just used my second incarnation in Berserk here. You want to use that pretty close to when it comes off cooldown, ideally of course when the bosses are next to each other, but if they're not next to each other you're probably going to need to use it anyway, just because of the way the timing of the fight works out. So there I chased Phemos out, and I got my bleeds up so I don't need to worry about them falling off right in the middle of the Whirlwind, and I'm going to have to do a jump spin to refresh Moonfire since he's way out there. So I do my jump spin here probably. No, I actually didn't do it at all, so that was a mistake there. But basically the reason I needed to use Incarnation there, even though I knew Whirlwind was coming up, was because this is a 7-minute fight. So you're going to want to use your Incarnation at the start, of course, and 3 minutes in, and then you're going to get a second one that comes up 6 minutes in. And if you don't use that Incarnation at 3 minutes pretty fast when it comes up, then what's going to happen is your Incarnation at the 6-minute mark is going to come out at like 6:15 or 6:30. And then unless you're like literally pushing the Berserk, which maybe you are if you're progressing on it, that's totally possible, then you're going to lose out on some Incarnation or Berserk time. And you're also not going to have the advantage of being able to pick when you use your cooldowns, maybe to line up with Trinket Procs or with Tiger's Fury better. So I just used my third coin here. You want to use your coin, if you have a lucky double-sided coin, you want to use that pretty much when it comes off every time, because it's similar with Incarnation. If you use it every time, you can get 4 coins in, one at 0 minutes, one at 2 minutes, one at 4 minutes, one at 6 minutes. And if you stall your coins too much, then that 6-minute one is not going to come up in time, or you're not going to be able. It's not going to come up in time for your third Incarnation in Berserk. And obviously, you want to have that so you can sync the two to get the most benefit out of them. So here I'm chasing Phemos out and refreshing my bleeds again. I had to refresh Savage Roar here, but I'm chilling on dot up times. And one thing I can mention is we had me as part of a roar rotation whenever the pull was happening on the Whirlwind. So I would get the first Whirlwind pull, and then I'd get it again whenever my Savage Roar came off, my Stampeding Roar came off cooldown, basically. So at this point, I'm in execute range. I can refresh my Rips with Ferocious Bites, And there's a couple things to mention about this. A lot of times what you're going to need to do is you're going to need to refresh those rips with like less than 5-point fresh spites, and that's okay. It's not ideal, of course. Obviously you would want to refresh them with 5 combo points whenever you can, but it just doesn't happen. You don't have the energy or the combo points for that to consistently happen every time, so you gotta make do with what you got sometimes. So you have to cast these at whatever many combo points you have to keep the rips from falling off, because if they fall off, then you're gonna be down 5 combo points, and you have to get those 5 combo points to put the rip back up, which is pretty shitty. So if your Rake or Moonfire is getting low, you want to try to prioritize refreshing rip first if you absolutely have to, which if you were watching carefully you saw happen a couple times here. I had to do a 2 combo point first spite, but I'm just doing my best to keep my bleeds up while this whole first spite shenanigans and all the fight clusterfuck is going on. So here you're going to see that my Incarnation and my third Incarnation, my 4th coin are off cooldown, and my Berserk is also off cooldown, and I still have my 2nd potion. So I'm going to go ahead and use them here. Obviously this isn't ideal. You would want the bosses to be next to each other if possible, but it's just not an easy thing to pull off, because this whirlwind is always going to happen around this part of the fight, and that's when your cooldowns are going to come up, so it's kind of just a shitty thing. You can see I refreshed my bleeds here. I had to refresh my Rake to get the double damage Rake on him before I ran out. I blink out, and then I go back on this guy. I almost die because I'm bad and I stand in the fire, but it's okay because I've got my shield walls and I can heal myself. So I keep my rips, try to keep my bleeds up as much as possible the last second. There I probably should have bit, because the boss is pretty much dead, but I made a mistake there as well. So that's about it for Twin Ogrons, guys. If you found the video helpful, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe, and thanks for watching.